Good morning, everyone. I'm Taryn Saunders, Thought Leadership Manager at Trialogue, and thank you for joining us this morning. Trialogue hosts these virtual forums usually on the last Thursday of every month. This month is known as Women's Month, and in partnership with the Vodacom Foundation, we're discussing how girls and women can thrive in STEM, or the science, technology, engineering, and mathematics fields. With our expert panelists, we'll explore what businesses and organizations can do to close the gender skills gaps in STEM, to create more opportunities for women to work in STEM, and to ensure that our future generations are ready for the increasingly STEM and ICT-focused world. Just a few technical points before we begin. There are two ways to engage. You're welcome to use the chat function to connect with fellow delegates and to share your thoughts. And we also encourage you to ask questions, which we ask you to do via the Q&A box rather than the chat box. And we'll draw from those for our expert panelists to answer from when we get to the discussion section. So please direct your question to the relevant panelist if you can, and try and keep your questions succinct. Then a short survey will pop up on your screen at the end of the session, and it will also be shared with you via email. And please do share your thoughts here so that we can keep improving these sessions for you. The session is being recorded, and the notes and recording will be available to everyone. Moving on to our agenda. So after my brief introduction, I'll be handing over to each of our three panelists for their opening comments. We'll then dive into discussion, and our panelists will answer some of your questions from the Q&A box. Each panelist will then give short closing comments. The first poll will appear on your screen now. And we'd like to know which type of organization you represent. And then we'll leave that on just for a brief overview of what Trialogue does. So Trialogue is one of a few consultancies that focus exclusively on responsible business. We do this through our consulting and advisory platforms, as well as through our knowledge sharing platforms. With our knowledge sharing platforms, Trialogue convenes the annual Business in Society conference. We also publish the Trialogue Business in Society Handbook, which sees its 26th edition this year. And we encourage you to profile your development work in this year's edition. The Trialogue Knowledge Hub is an online library of research, reporting, case studies, and information on responsible business and development to help inform responsible business decisions and help strengthen the impact of investment in development. And the write-up and recording of this webinar will be available on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. Then the Trialogue Academy is an online learning platform offering courses for both nonprofits and companies. Let's have a look at the results of the first poll. So in the room with us at the moment, we have mostly nonprofit organizations and then a couple from big businesses and other organizations. Thank you so much. Now, before we hear from our panelists, we'd like to hear from you again in our next poll. What do you think are the biggest reasons for the gender gap in STEM fields? And we're going to leave the second poll up for a few seconds. And just to repeat this, the question here, it's to hear from you, what are the biggest reasons that you think exist for the gender gap in STEM fields? Thank you. Let's look at those results. So most answered, 39% answered that young girls and women do not have enough access to role models and mentors in STEM fields. And 32% thought that STEM careers are not encouraged and explored enough at school level. The third most popular was that many women are not aware of the opportunities that exist in STEM fields. Thank you so much for answering that. I'd like to start off our discussion by sharing some research into the gender skills gap in STEM. So the first image is taken from the World Economic Forum Global Gender Gap Report in 2023. And it shows the share of women in the STEM workforce and the non-STEM workforce. It shows that while women make up almost half of total employment in non-STEM fields, women only make up 29.9% of workers in STEM fields. And this hasn't changed much between 2015 and 2023. And the second image shows the share of women STEM graduates by years since graduation. The data suggests that there needs to be an intervention in terms of assisting with the transition from university into the world of work. The percentage of female STEM graduates is increasing each year, but there's still a significant drop in retention. Among those who graduated with a STEM degree in 2017, 35.5% were women, but only a year after graduation, 29.6% of people holding STEM jobs were women. The data shows that almost 15% of women who get their STEM degrees are no longer in the field 5 years later. Then in terms of CSI spend in education in South Africa, Trialogue's data from the Business and Society Handbook shows that maths and science are the most supported subject areas, receiving on average 30% of education spend, and that was in 2022. And in the third image, we know that women are generally underrepresented in leadership roles, but this is especially apparent in STEM work. Women account for 29.9% of entry-level workers, 29.9% of senior workers, but then the share of women in manager or director positions drops to 1/4, and women's representation in high-level leadership roles such as VP and C-suite drops even lower to 17.8% and 12.4%, respectively. Let's focus a bit on ICT and tech specifically. So an article from UN Women called "How Can We Supercharge an Equitable Digital Future" is one of many articles to point out the problems with women being underrepresented in STEM, as well as to make recommendations. It shares that women and girls remain underrepresented across the creation, the use, and regulation of technology. Women are less likely to enter tech careers, but more likely to face online harassment and violence. This limits digital empowerment, but it also limits the tech industry as a whole. The UN reported in 2022 that over the past decade, women's exclusion from the digital sphere has shaped $1 trillion of the GDP of low and middle income countries. They make 4 recommendations. The first is to close gaps in digital access and skills. And this includes addressing affordability, access to electricity, privacy and safety, addressing social norms, and digital skills and literacy. The second is to support women and girls in STEM so they can shape research, policy, and investment. Stereotypes and gender roles do play a part here, but so does hostility in the actual work environment. A 21% gender pay gap is quoted, as well as considerably lower rates of promotion for women than for men. A Woman Who Tech survey in 2020 showed that nearly half of women in STEM report experiencing workplace harassment. There's a reminder here to focus on the systems that exclude women from STEM. The third is to create tech that meets the needs of women and girls. And this will help address issues like unequal representation in data sets. In AI, for example, a global analysis of 133 AI systems from 1988 to today found that 44.2% displayed gender bias, and 25.7% of AI systems showed both gender and racial bias. The fourth recommendation is to address technology-facilitated gender-based violence, and this will involve collaboration between many sectors. Closer to home, I just want to bring in a quote from Thabiseng Moleko. She says that encouraging young women into STEM education and training would not only reduce the overall shortage of scarce and critical skills, but also strengthen women's economic empowerment by moving them from vulnerable positions in low-skilled and informal jobs to the stability of the formal economy. This is a complex issue, and in South Africa, with the growing unemployment rate and an economy which shows an increasing need for STEM-focused jobs and a digital future, as well as a need to increase gender parity, how can we start to address this and to create and improve systems that allow women and girls to thrive in STEM? What is the role of CSI, of businesses, and of nonprofits in addressing this? I'd like to introduce our panelists. For now, their cameras and mics are off, and I'll ask them to turn on their cameras one by one as they share. They are Dr. Andile Dube, UNICEF Education Manager at UNICEF South Africa, Angela Abrams, Executive Head of CSI at Vodacom Foundation, and Alisani Sitse, ICT Coordinator and a graduate of the Vodacom Foundation's Youth Academy program. We'll start with Andile. You were involved in the publication called Igniting a Path for Women to Thrive in STEM Careers earlier this year. Can you tell us more about the importance of women and girls participating in STEM and why it's especially important for our economy in South Africa? Are there any key statistics that you've come across that highlight how important this is? And you can switch on your camera and unmute. Thank you. If you could unmute Andile, I think you're still on mute there.
Thank you. Good morning, Taryn, and good morning, colleagues, and thank you for joining this webinar. When I first heard about the questions, Taryn, it struck me that in 2023, we still have to constantly explain why the largest percentage of the population should be given opportunities to participate in the economy. So back to your question about why should girls and women participate in STEM, for us it's simple. If a third of the a majority of the population in South Africa are women, that's a good, huge gender dividend. Which means it is those people who can get into the economy and participate and strengthen the economy and provide the skills that in most cases are not available. We have to start with thinking about why girls. Worldwide, 1 in 3 people have access to the internet. Conditions for girls are worse. So boys are more likely to have access than girls, and girls lag behind in a number of areas, STEM being one of them, while STEM should be one of the fields that build towards the schoolwork to transition and opportunities for future work. We see that happening and increasing in post-education system, post-primary education system. We see less women participating in careers or in STEM-related careers at universities. But we also see that when it comes to employment, women are most least likely to be employed in STEM-related careers. You've covered a number of statistics that come from the UN Women report, which shows that for the economy, we need to remember that unless we employ women, we are letting ourselves down on that gender dividend, but we are really dealing with or not addressing issues around equality and equity. And for us as UNICEF, that's quite important for the SDGs. And as we know, for us in the SDGs, we need to be strengthening equality or quality education, but we also want to make sure that girls are not left behind. These girls are soon to be women, and these girls are soon to be household leaders. They're soon to be providers. But if we are leaving them in work or streams or in opportunities that will give them opportunities to break out of the poverty chain, then we are letting down the society as a whole. We know as we stand that we have less girls who are getting into STEM careers. We have less girls who have mentors that will encourage them to get into STEM careers. Back to the report. The report is a product of a partnership between UNICEF and PwC. Both organizations support Generation Unlimited, which is a global private-public youth partnership that addresses whose mission globally is to skill the world's young people and connect them to opportunities for employment, entrepreneurship, and social impact. In the case of South Africa, this includes connecting schools. This includes scaling up online remote learning skills and livelihood platforms. This includes encouraging entrepreneurship skills and opportunities. And lastly, this is around youth as change makers and volunteers. In the partnership, we worked with a number of organizations. One, on the youth platforms, we worked with Capacitate. Secondly, we worked with a Vodacom Foundation in Girls in STEM, which is one of the oldest organizations that have been supported by UNICEF that addresses the plight of young girls in STEM, encouraging them and giving them opportunities for job shadowing, exposing them to careers that are mostly STEM related. You could, colleagues, follow a Technogirl online just to see what work is being done with girls in that area. So the report covers a number of things. Firstly, it addresses issues around educating girls and women about STEM careers and their impact on the world. And I'm happy that in the survey, this came out as one of the top issues, that if girls and women are not aware of these careers, the chances of choosing those are very limited. And to do this would require partnerships between the private sector, the public sector, and the PwC UNICEF partnership was one of the best examples. And this we work with organizations like your Technogirls, as I mentioned before, Girl Fly program, which deals with drones, SA Fly Labs also that deals with roles. Second issue is issues around role modeling. If we continue to have women underrepresentation in ICT-related careers, girls are least likely to get role models, and you would continue to rely on men and not demystify this idea of ICT as a career that can be accessed by all. And so we need to improve issues around women representation, as it is shown in the report and also shown in the UN report, UN Women report. The third issue is we need to really bridge this gender divide. We need to be able to provide opportunities for women to participate and contribute to the economy of South Africa and the economy of the world. And lastly, we need to take seriously the issues around career development, as low as schooling level to higher education, and to the world of work. Just this whole work stream or strain of learning to earning opportunities for young women. We need to ensure that there are opportunities for mentorship, We need to ensure that this program are sponsored, and we need to ensure that we work with people who actually, or organizations that actually have done this and have evidence around how this would work and how we can support moving from innovations into scale. So the Igniting a Pathway for Women to Thrive in STEM report really addresses issues of how we will take young women from a schooling level and provide those opportunities for them to, explore the world, to see the world of the STEM, and then provide platforms and mechanisms and opportunities for them to shadow others and to be mentored into the world of work. Thanks, Terry.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Andile. And I think that gives us a really good overview of the context in South Africa as well. And thank you for sharing more about that program. And it's good to get a general overview before we focus on a specific business, which we'll do now. We'll hear next from Angela at Vodacom. And Vodacom believes that digital technologies can address some of the most pressing challenges in our society. Vodacom Foundation's Youth Academy is just one of the ways that Vodacom creates opportunities for women to gain more skills, to participate more fully in tech and ICT, and to share these skills with others. Angela, can you describe this program to us and explain how it creates opportunities for women in STEM, as well as some of the benefits you've seen? And you can turn on your camera and unmute. Thank you.
Okay, good morning. Hi. Good morning, Karen. Good morning, all. And a special shout out to Andile. I haven't seen her in four years. It's been really good to see her this morning on camera. And morning, everyone, all the participants. I think, Taryn, both you and Andile have set quite, I think, a good background to the conversation. We don't have to explain why Vodacom is doing the work that we do, particularly around STEM. Vodacom being a telco company, obviously, digital technologies are close to our heart, and the work that we do is hinged on technology. So the Youth Academy program in particular was started in 2013 when we saw that we need to start working with young people who have matriculated but are unable to go to university because they don't have the resources. So Vodacom has two strategic pillars, education and gender empowerment. And so even though our Youth Academy program falls within our education pillar, we are very intentional in the work that we do around including and ensuring that women are included, but not only included in the programs, but also supported. And we walk this journey with them on our Youth Academy programs. So the Youth Academy program, as I said, was started in 2013 in partnership with the MICT and Cisco. And as I said, it seeks to provide unemployed youth who have a matric but no resources to go to university with relevant ICT skills. It's a NQF level 4 qualification in basic ICTs. It's a 12-month program. It's a demanding 12-month program with quite a rigorous practical element to it. And it costs, I think, approximately 100,000 Rand per person. And so this program, Vodacom offers free of charge to young people across the country. So it's in all 9 provinces. There are 10 academies nationwide, and we host this program in those youth academies for the duration of 12 months. Since inception, we have trained 1,576 young people, and each year we have more female recruits than male. Last year we had 78% women, and this year we are sitting on 85%. The benefits of the program that we've seen so far, we've in fact just completed a monitoring and evaluation report. And I think our M&E specialist is actually on the call this morning. She conducted an M&E exercise with the Youth Academy program about 2 months ago, where she interviewed a number of the alumni who attended the program. And so even though 1,576 might seem like a small number, I think the benefits of the program has actually been quite significant. I think one of the biggest benefits is that we now have 1,576 young people who have a qualification that they never had before. So a qualification that connects them to the world of work and it connects them to the economy, particularly in the technology space. I think from Sandy's report, 83% of the young people that she interviewed said it's still the only qualification that they have. 163 of these young people who completed this course has been recruited and are in-host SMMEs in our innovation center. Some of these graduates, 195 of them, has been taken and placed by the Vodacom Foundation as ICT coordinators in our Vodacom supported schools, ECDs, and NPOs. And the value of that program is that not only does this give them valuable work experience, but it also allows them to work with schools, ECDs, and NPOs who are also excluded from the digital world. So it gives them an opportunity to now transfer the skills that they have and make digital and technology accessible to more people. Unemployment is a huge issue in South Africa, and so even though we have, skilled up and young people have this qualification, we're finding that unemployment is still an issue, and quite a few of the young people said that they're still struggling to find employment. But I think that the benefits still outweigh the negatives in this program that Vodacom has embarked on. And I'll stop there, Taryn.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Angela. I think it's really important for us to hear the details of a program like this and the good work that it's doing. And I really like what you said about how it connects the graduates to the world of work and the tech space. And also how you shared how the graduates and the way that they connect themselves with the world of work after that, it shares the effect. It shares it to different types of organizations and to different people. So thank you for sharing that. And we have with us on the call today, Alusani Sitse, who is an ICT coordinator who went through the Vodacom Foundation's Youth Academy program. So we would love to hear from you. What was the experience like for you? And how has it changed the way that you see your career and the kind of impact that you want to make in the future? Alusani, you can turn on your camera and unmute yourself. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Sitse Alusani. I'd like to thank Taryn for aiding me to be part of this panelist. Well, as an ICT coordinator, I'd actually say that with regards to what has changed the way that I see my career and the kind of impact that I want to make in future, I'd actually say that now I have a brighter side of my career because I now see my career as an innovative career, and I've realized that ICT is the world's most leading career, to a point that it is in demand. And as for the kind of impact that I want to make, I've decided that I'm gonna help younger girls to thrive into the ICT field by actually giving them early monitoring and also grooming them into studying towards the ICT. And going forward, something that I'm also gonna do again would be to actually study more harder for myself, because I've realized that being in an ICT department, it's quite challenging because every single day you come across a lot of challenges, you discover ways to survive in the ICT world. So for me, it's a quite challenging situation, though it's in a very good challenging way. So I believe that's all that I can say for now, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We really appreciate you speaking, and it's wonderful to hear how the program has had an impact on you and the way that you teach others and the way that you think about your career and future as well. So thank you. I'd like to ask all of the panelists to turn on your cameras now, and we'd like to ask a few more questions just before we go into the Q&A session from the audience. So firstly for Angela, so we spoke about obviously how having more women in STEM and in ICT careers has so many advantages for the country and for the industry as a whole. And I'd love to hear more about what some of the advantages are that you've seen for Vodacom in particular, especially as a tech-focused business.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's well known. I don't even have to repeat it, that men still outnumber women in the tech industry. And so, particularly in the tech industry, women are now not only outnumbered and underrepresented in the workplace, but women consumers of tech are also underrepresented. So we've seen at Vodacom that when you include women in STEM and in tech, and you include them and increase their participation in shaping technology, because I think they say that technology reflects the creator, right? So when women participate, you have a situation where tech then meets the needs of women, because women too are consumers of tech. They might be less so, particularly with the digital divide, but they do consume tech. And so what we found in Vodacom is that when we include women in these spaces, we then have tech that meets the needs of women. We have at Vodacom various applications. One is called Mom and Baby, that looks at the needs of women and moms. We have something called an application called Bright Sky, which looks at gender-based violence and domestic violence. And these applications have all been implemented with women at the forefront. And so when we include women in tech, we start representing what they need as well. We're also finding that when you have women leaders in the tech space, and I think Andile spoke about it, you spoke about it, when you have women leaders in the tech space, you also encourage young girls to follow in their footsteps. So they become role models. Alusani is one of the role models that Vodacom has in the ECD space, or where she works in the school. So when we're placing these youth academy graduates in the schools, in the ECD spaces, in the NPO spaces, it's not just for them to get work experience and for them to transfer their skills, but they also become role models for the girls in those schools, for the girls at the ECDs, for the young people who frequent the NPOs that they're working at. So when you start encouraging women to embrace and pursue these career choices, you see that you now also have these role models. And if we don't do that, and if companies don't act, we stand to risk allowing tech to further widen the gap and increase gender disparities, because that's the other danger. Because there is this huge gap already, if you don't actively and intentionally work to include women in these technological spaces, tech is going to move on, and women who don't have access will be left behind. And so companies need to ensure that they're doing that. And I think that for Vodacom, what we saw was working was that we are intentional when we are including women. So we don't just include women and say, okay, we've included X amount of women, but it's how do you support women? Because I think sometimes we lazily say that women aren't interested in tech. That's not it. The tech industry is hostile towards women. And so what we need to do as companies, we need to recognize that hostility. We need to address it in the cultures. We need to address it in the way that we support women. And when we do that, then we'll see the real benefits and the advantages of having women at the forefront of tech.
Thank you, Angela. Some very important points that you brought up there. And a question has come in from Ben in the audience that I'd like to hear your thoughts on as well, which is specifically what are some of the difficulties that women do face in the tech space?
Okay. Like I was saying, the tech space is hostile towards women, and sometimes we bring women onto programs and we say, okay, but you know, you've done a program, you've got a qualification, but we seem to forget that there's a culture in the workplace, there's a culture in this industry that excludes women, and we need to be cognizant of how we embrace women in this space, how we support women in this space, so that I think it was Andile or yourself who called the drop-in retention. I think 38% of women complete the degrees, but only 29.6% actually go through with the careers. And that is around how we actually support women in these spaces. And I think companies need to, one, recognize the hostilities, they need to recognize the pay gaps, they need to recognize the misogynistic cultures that still prevail in these spaces, and they need to be intentional in the support for women in these spaces, so that you're not only putting women on a journey of a tech qualification, but you're also supporting a journey in that career, so that she becomes the leader that we want to see in these tech spaces.
Thank you so much, Angela. I think that brings out some very important points of how businesses can support women through their careers as well. And Andile, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question as well. I mean, you've worked from a different perspective, and I'd love to hear some of your thoughts on how you think that organizations can help break down those barriers for women as they join STEM careers.
You know, the issue of employers in general is to demystify, the requirement is to demystify work and gender roles. So we can't be bringing in the social aspect or social barriers that women still experience outside the workplace to areas where women have fought so hard to qualify to get into those spaces. So we need to make the workspaces to be conducive for these for women, particularly the young women who are still transiting from university into the world of work. Organizations also need to realize the role of women within the organization in general before we get into STEM position, because it gets difficult to concentrate on just one area if we are still underrepresented in engineering and in all of the other areas. The second issue is young women, when they leave schooling, they already are going through some of the programs that are getting them into understanding what it means to be emancipated from all the bundles of being a girl and a young woman. And so that challenge and that transition or those new learnings should not be cancelled by the world of work. Angela has covered a lot around how do you ensure that the environment is conducive for young women as they enter the world of work. How do you ensure that even how the structure of work is conducive, even the understanding of what women have to deal with from the home and work should be part of the work culture and the understanding for leadership. We need to do a lot again around addressing one of the slides that you were showing from the UN Women Report is showing how during the first entry jobs, women would be a larger percentage, but as we go towards the decision making, that becomes lower and lower. And what is important is as organizations to create policies and mechanisms and strategies that are very deliberate around how do we ensure that women who enter the world of work are already supported and mentored into transiting into the higher positions and into more decision-making positions in the world of work. We need to be able to demystify this whole idea, or a whole idea of a male-dominated environment that does not have conducive environment, that does not understand the needs of women as we enter the world of work, that does not even understand the requirements of the basic policies in South Africa, like your BEE. But it's also a social, it's a social a requirement. It is what we want to show as organization as we address issues that are external. If we are supposed to be organizations that are serious about social, sustainability and social contributions to society, and understanding that majority of our customers are women, we need to be able to show that what we do with the women that we employ. And lastly, we need to because we work in the pre-work context, so that will be your school and tertiary organizations and public or private sector has a role in influencing what happens before young women get into their organization. So influencing how universities support the entry into the schooling, into the universities, how young women are trained, how confidence is built through mentorship and coaching. So availing some of their private sector leaders into universities for mentorship opportunities, and just making sure that organizations are out there, making sure that they are showcasing successful women in these careers, and making sure that policies and processes and platforms are conducive. We're creating opportunities for young women. I mean, we know organizations where they even have areas where young women can keep their children during the day, just to show how supportive those organizations are. So it will take organizations that think about themselves not as just that office, but as a build up or a part of a society and a contributor to society, and a responsible organization to make spaces for women in general, but women in ICT and higher decision-making positions. Thank you. Thank you
so much. And you mentioned this briefly as you were discussing that, and I know you focused more about the workplace and more specifically, but just to focus in on a question that Karen has asked. She's interested to know what is being done to address social issues to support women and girls pursuing careers in STEM. So if you could, if any examples come to mind more specifically of how the social issues are being addressed.
So I could use two examples. Firstly, I like what one of the women writers said in helping us think about what needs to be done in ICT, where she says we need to be improving access to access to pre-tertiary education. We need to make sure that we are improving gender responsive STEM education and all of those. But what is important on the social aspect, using example of Technogirl for an example, is how you take young women from environments or communities that are poor, from schools that are poor, that do not have access to technology, that do not have role modeling, and put them through a program which addresses awareness, which addresses some of the social skills. I mean, just using the Technogirl example, where you deal with issues around sexual reproductive health for young kids, for girls, where we are dealing up with identity formation for young girls, all the social issues that are needed whilst you are addressing or interesting or inducting them into STEM-related careers, ICT one being an example. So just that comprehensive model becomes a great one. We've had examples with organizations like a Girlfly program, which is an organization that inducts or onboards or supports young women into drone technologies and related technologies, and how they don't only concentrate on how do we advance the ICT and the STEM and the drone aspects, but dealing with issues of young women and puberty and how and grooming them as young women as well. So you take you become deliberate around where do you get the, or where do you contribute. So if you are going to be making a very critical contribution in society, you would target the rural young women, you would target young women who are in poverty-stricken homes, you will target quintile 1, 2, and 3 schools, which mostly have kids or girls who would otherwise not have this access. And so dealing with that social issue of poverty and access. The third issue is, earlier we spoke about helping to reimagine education. So if young women and young children in their own environments that they exist do not have access, no matter how we try, we were never going to change or turn the tide for them. We'll never be able to help them break the cycle of poverty. And so opening up access to quality interventions, to quality schooling, to quality support, and to quality mentoring and coaching are 3 most important issues. So ideally, in closing on that question, we don't only want to think about just providing that access. We want to think about where are we drawing, or who is this young woman that we want to target, and where is she located? What are the social issues that they are dealing with? What are the structural issues that they are dealing with? And what are the individuals that are dealing with? And as we onboard them into technology-related fields, we are also empowering them as individuals, building their identity, building their empowering them and giving them the confidence to thrive in this very difficult environment and difficult field. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And there are many questions coming through, and we'd just like to touch on as many of them as possible. But just to ask you, Angela, so there's a question here from Geraldine, and this was one thing that you touched on and that Andile touched on as well, just about partnership. Geraldine says, since there are quite a few women organizations on the rise, does it not make sense for corporates like Vodacom to bring them all together to work on important matters such as STEM? And I know you have mentioned you work with many different partners, and we'd love to know a bit more about that, and also what advice you'd have to other corporates in terms of their partnerships in doing projects like this.
Yes, thanks, Devin. And actually, the advice was going to be partnerships from Vodacom, because we recognize that we can't do any of the programs that we implement on our own. The Youth Academy program in particular, we do in partnership with the MICT-CETA, with Cisco, Microsoft. We're looking at working with Google. We work with the Department of Basic Education. So we can't do any of the work that we do in this space without partnerships. We are always willing to explore and discuss new partnerships and new collaborations, because we understand that the challenge is huge. Vodacom doesn't have the expertise that UNICEF, for instance, does in terms of the research that they do, the understanding they have around the socioeconomic problems. So when we're trying to implement a program, we do try and bring on as many partners as we can. So we are, as an organization, open to working with partners. We do work with partners. And so, yeah, it's definitely something that we're willing to explore, and we do all the time.
Thank you, Angela. And to touch on another aspect of this program and some of the others you've mentioned as well, there's a question here. I would like to know how Vodacom and UNICEF support, so focus on Vodacom for now, support girls who are in rural areas and those where access to technology and network is a challenge. And if not yet, is this something that you're looking into, and how are you planning to do that? Okay.
So over and above our Youth Academy program, Vodacom works with the Department of Basic Education around providing access to technology in schools. So currently we connect 2,598 schools, and we provided them with devices. We do also have a model that we call Schools of Excellence. We have 13 of those schools across the country, and a lot of them are in rural areas where we place ICT coordinators. One of our ICT coordinators are actually on the call, and that is to assist learners with technology. When we started working in early childhood development centers back in 2019, a lot of the people said to us, ECDs don't need devices. They don't need laptops. They don't need tablets. They need food. And Vodacom said, we understand that there's a food security issue in ECDs, but young little ones from the ages of 1 to 5 also need to start being exposed to technology. And I think it goes back to what Andile was saying around giving young girls access. And so that's what we're trying to do by, one, providing the equipment to the schools, the ECDs, but also then providing a warm body in the form of an ICT coordinator who can then take these learners, take the practitioners, take the educators through how the technology works. So that's one of the programs that we're doing as well. So currently we're supporting 2,598 schools across the country. A lot of them, all of them, quintile 1 and 2 schools, many of them in rural areas. And we are looking to expand our education ecosystem, which means that over and above the devices and the connectivity, we are looking to place more ICT coordinators like Alusani in more schools, so that, one, they can assist in accessing the technology, understanding the technology and using it, but also to be role models to young girls in schools.
Thank you so much, Angela. And there are many good questions in the Q&A here, and unfortunately we won't be able to get to all of them today because of time. A lot of them do focus on the workplace, and before we move on to closing comments from each of the panelists, I'd love to hear from Alusani, because of the important place that you're in right now with your career and your journey as a woman in the STEM and ICT space. What advice do you have for other young women who want to go into the STEM space or the ICT space specifically in their careers?
Thank you, Charin. My advice is that the best way to learn into the ICT field is to actually jump in and build yourself so you can go ahead and be a better person. And by that, I've seen that it is really critical for young people to engage in the ICT, because there is a stereotype that believes that ICT, or rather any other STEM field, it's only for male genders, of which that's not the case, because we have a lot of other ladies who are into the ICT and they are really doing well. So at the end of the day, my advice would be for us as young ladies to encourage these other young girls to do better. And by that, they shouldn't be intimidated by those who are doing much better, because I realize that there can also be some other people who will try to intimidate them and always trying to techno-bubble them and making them seem like they're not that intelligent. But at the end of the day, we can all do this. And yeah, we can all do this. We can actually encourage young girls to study at an early age. And by that, I've developed a program where I am working to actually encourage learners to study into the ICT. For specific, we have a computer appliance technology subject where I am working, and it's only done by learners who are doing grade 10 to grade 12. So by that, I've actually come with an innovative way to actually prep the younger girls who are doing grade 8 and grade 9 to come to the computer lab on after school and also on Saturdays to actually give them the inner side of what an ICT field really is. Because you find that a lot of learners are coming from a less privileged background whereby they don't even know what a laptop looks like, how to even switch on a laptop. Because remember, I'm being placed in a place whereby it's a rural area. So by actually giving those younger girls an access to come to the computer lab, it's actually helping them groom them into becoming better ladies in STEM. And also for instance, we have a program that is program like Code It Like a Girl. I'd encourage young girls to enter those programs so that they can help them build their confidence towards the IT field. And thank you. I believe that's all.
Thank you so much. Some really great advice there. And thank you for the part that you're playing in being a role model for young women as well. And just to keep an eye on the time, I'm going to ask each of the panelists for their brief closing thoughts now, and I'll ask you to keep those just to a minute. And the question is, what do you recommend companies do to include women more fully in STEM careers? And Andile, if we can start with you.
I think companies should be involved more, create conducive environments, support from the education level, so basic education level. I like the question about the rural education. We're trying to go systemic, so support the system to be able to provide, do practice responsible support to the system, and also just make sure that we demystify this whole issue. And if I want anything, if you remember anything from what we said today, just remember that women are here to provide at least 52% of the skill that is required. So remember that gender dividend, and provide a conducive, supportive environment for them, mentor, coach, and promote to decision-making roles. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Those are very important points. We appreciate that. Thank you. And Alusani, from your perspective, what do you recommend companies do to include women and girls more fully in STEM careers?
Thank you, Charin. On my side, I believe that
I think your mute and your video have gone off. While we wait for her to return, Angela, if we can hear from you, what do you recommend that companies do to include women more fully in STEM careers?
Thanks, Dan. So for me, an important thing is be intentional. So when you want to include women in STEM careers, be intentional about it. And by that, I mean, understand what all the barriers are, so that when you're including women in the workplace, you are supporting them in ways that they need to be supported. You are creating that conducive environment for their growth. And not only for their growth, but also for them to excel in those spaces. So for us at Vodacom, intentional is very important, but also partnerships. So if there's something that you don't know as an organization, then partner with experts, with organizations who have expertise in these areas. Yeah, so that's from our side. Thanks, Tara.
Thank you so much, Angela. And Alusani, I see you've joined us back on the call. If you want to, just for 30 seconds, if you can share from your perspective, what are your recommendations for companies for including women and girls in STEM careers?
Okay, sorry, I had a technical problem. But then on my side, I was saying that business can actually help support the ladies by promoting new financial instruments to increase and access towards the digital skills. And by that, women should also be included in the technology sector so that we can have more ladies, or rather women, included in companies, and more women leading into the ICT field. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And thank you very much to all of our panelists for your time and for your insights today. Before we close, I know we are just at the end of time. Just a reminder to read more about ICT and gender empowerment and many other responsible business topics on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. To increase your nonprofit's visibility through inclusion in the NPO directory, which is also featured on the Trialogue Knowledge Hub. To participate in the Trialogue Business in Society Handbook 2023, where you can advertise your company's shared value and social investment stories or your nonprofit's activities and results. Book your spot and diarize the Trialogue Business in Society conference next year, which will be the 14th and 15th of May. And then do connect with us on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, or X, or Instagram. Thank you for this discussion and enjoy the rest of your day.